The glass shattered before anyone could react. The billionaire froze mid-step, his phone slipping from his hand as the sound echoed across the marble hallway. A servant gasped. Another rushed forward. But he didn't move. His eyes were already on the crib. His daughter didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She didn't even turn her head. The silence after the crash was worse than the sound itself. She didn't hear that, the doctor said quietly, almost apologetically. The billionaire swallowed hard. Do it again. The doctor hesitated. Sir, I said do it again. A metal tray clanged loudly against the floor this time, sharp, violent, the kind of sound that made adults tense. Still nothing. The baby girl lay there peacefully, her tiny fingers curled, her chest rising and falling like nothing in the world was wrong. The billionaire felt something crack inside him, not loud, not dramatic, just a slow, ugly fracture that spread through his chest and refused to stop. How certain are you? He asked, his voice controlled but hollow. The doctor exhaled. Congenital, profound, bilateral. She was born deaf. The words landed one after another like stones. Born deaf. No, the billionaire said immediately. Run the tests again. We already did, twice. Then run them again. Silence. I will not accept this, he snapped. There has to be a mistake. The doctor didn't argue. That was the worst part. He had seen this look before. The look men wore when money failed them for the first time. We can explore implants later, the doctor said carefully. But as of now, she cannot hear. The billionaire turned away from the crib. For the first time in his life, there was a problem he couldn't intimidate, acquire, or bury. News outlets were already camped outside the gates by morning. The birth of his daughter had been global news, a legacy child, an heir, a symbol. But by afternoon, the windows were shuttered. No visitors, he ordered, no statements. What about the press? His assistant asked. They'll hear what I want them to hear. Inside the mansion, silence became policy. The baby's room was soundproofed within days, not because it helped her, but because it helped him. He couldn't stand the way noise now felt like mockery, laughter, music, footsteps. Every sound reminded him of what she would never experience. He stood over the crib one night, watching her sleep, and whispered, Say something. Nothing. He felt ridiculous, angry at himself, angry at her. Then, immediately ashamed of the thought, he stopped coming after that. Nurses rotated in shifts. Specialists flew in weekly. Machines were attached, electrodes placed, results printed. Nothing changed. She doesn't respond to auditory stimuli, one specialist said. She doesn't respond to music, another added. She may never speak, a third concluded. That was the sentence that finally broke him. Get out, the billionaire said flatly. The room cleared fast. That night, the mansion felt bigger than ever. Too many rooms, too many echoes, too much proof that his power meant nothing here. He didn't notice the maid at first. She had been assigned to the nursery weeks ago. Older woman, quiet, efficient. The kind of person people forget 5 minutes after speaking to her. But she noticed everything. She noticed how the baby's fingers twitched when the floor vibrated, how her breathing shifted when someone hummed low, not loud, how her eyes tracked movement, not sound. Every morning the maid greeted the baby the same way. "Good morning, little one," she said softly, placing a hand gently on the baby's chest. The nurses found it odd. "She can't hear you," one of them said once. The maid smiled politely. "I know." Then she kept talking anyway. One afternoon, the billionaire walked past the nursery and stopped. The maid was seated beside the crib, humming. not loudly, deep, almost like a vibration rather than a tune. Her palm rested lightly on the baby's back. The baby stirred, just slightly. The billionaire felt his heart jump and immediately shut it down. Coincidence, he told himself. Reflex. He walked away. But the next day, it happened again, and the next. Always when the maid was there, always when she hummed. He said nothing. He couldn't afford hope. Hope hurt more than certainty. Weeks passed. Then one night, everything shifted. He returned early from a meeting, his tie loosened, his head pounding. As he passed the nursery, he heard something that made him stop cold. A low, rhythmic thumping. Not music, not noise. Something else. He pushed the door open quietly. The maid was kneeling on the floor. In her hands was a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Old cloth. Faded. The kind of thing that had been carried for years. She hesitated, sensing someone behind her. Slowly, she turned. Their eyes met. The billionaire's voice came out sharp. "What is that?" The maid looked at the bundle, then back at him. Something unreadable passed across her face. "It's not mine," she said. "What are you doing with my daughter?" The baby suddenly reacted. Her body jerked, her hands flailed, her mouth opened, and a sound came out. Not a cry, not a laugh, a sound. The billionaire's breath caught painfully in his throat. "Do that again?" he whispered. The maid didn't move. Fear crept into his voice. "I said do it again." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she unwrapped the cloth. Inside was something he had never seen before, and the moment she touched it, the baby responded instantly. The billionaire staggered back like he'd been struck. "What did you just do?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "What did you bring into my house?" The maid swallowed. "You won't like the answer," she said. And for the first time since his daughter was born, the billionaire felt real terror. If you're already feeling this, don't leave yet. This story only gets heavier from here. Like the video, if you're still watching, subscribe. Because the truth behind that object will change everything. The room felt smaller after that. The billionaire closed the door behind him slowly, deliberately, as if any sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile moment had just occurred. His eyes never left the object in the maid's hands. "Put it down," he said. The maid didn't. Instead, she gently pressed it against the side of the crib. Not near the baby's ears, against the wooden frame. The object vibrated softly, deep, controlled, almost alive. The baby's legs kicked. Her fingers clenched. Her mouth opened again, and this time the sound was clearer, stronger, a startled, broken little noise that filled the room like a crack of light. The billionaire's knees weakened. He grabbed the edge of the crib to steady himself. "That's impossible," he whispered. The maid finally stepped back. She rewrapped the object carefully, like someone closing a wound. "You should call the doctors," she said. His voice rose. "You think I haven't done that?" "No," she replied calmly. "I think you should call different ones." They came running. 2 doctors at first, then 3. Then a neurologist who had flown in from another country just 2 weeks earlier and had declared the case unchangeable. They repeated the tests again and again. Nothing made sense. "She's responding," one doctor muttered, staring at the monitor, not to sound, but to frequency. "That's not hearing," another argued. "But it's not nothing," the first snapped back. The billionaire stood in the corner, arms crossed so tightly his knuckles were white. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe properly. "Do it," he said suddenly, pointing at the maid. Whatever you did, again." The room went silent. The maid hesitated. "Not like this? What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "this is not a trick." "I don't care what it is," he said sharply. "If you can make my daughter react, you will do it, right now." The maid looked at the doctors, then at the baby, then back at him. "There are risks," she said. "Everything in this house exists because I accept risk." She shook her head. "Not this kind." His voice cracked before he could stop it. "You don't get to decide that." Silence. Then quietly she said, "I already did, once, and I paid for it with my child." The room froze. The billionaire turned slowly. "What did you say?" The maid sat down heavily in the chair beside the crib. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked old, not tired, worn. "My son was born like her," she said, "deaf." One of the doctors inhaled sharply. "I didn't have money," she continued. "I didn't have hospitals. I didn't have specialists flying in on private jets. I had a village and a belief that silence does not mean absence." The billionaire felt something tighten painfully behind his eyes. "What happened to him?" he asked, though he already sensed the answer. She smiled faintly. "He died." The word fell heavy. "An illness?" one doctor asked. "No," she said. "A delay. By the time someone finally listened to me, it was too late." The baby stirred again, restless now, like she could feel the tension thickening the air. The billionaire took a step forward. "And that thing?" he said quietly. "That object. What is it?" The maid looked down at the bundle in her lap. "It's a resonance box," she said. "Handmade. It doesn't produce sound the way you understand it. It produces vibration patterns, frequencies the body feels before the ear ever understands." "That's not medical," a doctor scoffed. "No," the maid agreed. "It's older than medicine." The billionaire exhaled slowly. "Why haven't you said anything before now?" "Because people like you don't listen until something shocks them," she replied without bitterness.
That stung more than he expected. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his office watching security footage from the nursery on repeat, watching his daughter respond, tiny movements, subtle reactions to something no machine had detected. Hope crept in anyway, and with it, fear. "What if this is nothing?" he asked the head specialist the next morning. "What if I'm chasing a coincidence?" "Then you're a father," the doctor replied, "doing what fathers do." The maid was called into his office later that day. He dismissed everyone else. "I want the truth," he said, "all of it." She nodded. "Then you must promise not to turn this into a spectacle." "I don't care about spectacle." "You will," she said gently, "when the world comes knocking." He leaned forward. "Try me." She told him everything, about the village where children were placed against drums during rituals, not to hear, but to feel rhythm, about how her son had responded the same way his daughter had, about how the world laughed when she tried to explain it. "They called it superstition," she said. "They said I was in denial." "And were you?" She met his gaze. "Yes, but denial kept him alive longer than their certainty would have." The billionaire closed his eyes. For the first time since the diagnosis, he cried. Not loudly, not in collapse, just tears sliding down silently as his shoulders shook. "I've spent my life believing power was loud," he said hoarsely, "that if you spoke forcefully enough, the world would obey." The maid said nothing. "I didn't know silence could still carry something," he whispered. The next weeks were secret. No press, no announcements, no visitors, just controlled sessions. The maid, the object, the baby. The results were slow, painfully slow. Some days felt like nothing was happening at all. Other days, the baby startled so hard it took everything in him not to shout. Doctors argued constantly. "This isn't hearing," one insisted. "It's neural response," another countered. "It's placebo." "She's a baby." Still, the data changed. Incrementally. Undeniably. One night, as the billionaire stood beside the crib, his daughter turned toward him when he spoke. Not perfectly. not clearly, but deliberately. He dropped to his knees. "Did you see that?" he whispered. The maid nodded. "She's learning your presence." He laughed through tears. "She knows me." The maid hesitated. "Be careful." "With what?" "With believing this ends the way you want." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked at the baby, then back at him. Every miracle demands something in return. Before he could ask what she meant, alarms sounded. Machines beeped sharply. The baby stiffened. Doctors rushed in. "What's happening?" the billionaire shouted. No one answered him. The maid stood frozen. The resonance box slipped from her hands and hit the floor, and the room filled with a sound the billionaire would never forget. His daughter screaming. "If you're still here, tap like right now. It tells the algorithm this story matters. And comment what you think is happening, because the next part changes everything."
The scream tore through the room like glass through skin. It wasn't loud in the way people expected. It wasn't sharp. It was raw, broken, confused, coming from a place that had never learned how to release sound properly. The billionaire felt it in his bones. "Turn it off," one doctor shouted. "I didn't do anything," the maid cried, backing away from the crib. Monitors spiked. Numbers jumped erratically. The baby's tiny body arched, her face twisted in distress. The billionaire pushed past the doctors. "Get away from her," he barked. "All of you." "Sir, you need to step back," someone said. He didn't listen. He never did. He scooped his daughter into his arms, pressing her against his chest the way he should have done months ago. Her scream faltered, not stopped, but softened like a wave losing momentum when it hit shore. "It's okay," he whispered urgently, his voice shaking. "It's okay, I'm here." The maid stepped forward cautiously. "She's overwhelmed." "By what?" he demanded. "By awareness," she said. "This is the first time her body has fully registered sound as intrusion." One doctor snapped, "That's not how it works." The maid's voice rose for the first time. "Then explain why she's calming down when he holds her." Silence. The billionaire felt her breathing slow against him. Her fists loosened. Her scream dissolved into a hoarse whimper. "She's never cried like that before," he whispered, almost to himself. "That's because she's never felt this much before," the maid replied. The doctors stabilized the monitors. The alarms faded. But something had changed. The room didn't feel clinical anymore. It felt exposed. Later that night, after everyone left, the billionaire sat alone in the nursery. His daughter slept in his arms. He didn't dare put her down. The maid stood by the door. "You should go home," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Not tonight." He didn't argue. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked finally. The maid didn't pretend not to understand. "Because men like you only hear what confirms what you already believe." He winced. "And what did I believe?" "That problems bow to pressure," she said. "And people without titles don't carry answers." He stared at his daughter's face. "I was wrong." "Yes," the maid said gently. "But you're learning." The next day, the billionaire did something no one expected. He canceled everything. Meetings. Flights. Deals worth more than some countries' budgets. When his assistant protested, he said only one thing: "My daughter can't hear the world yet. So the world can wait." The sessions resumed, but carefully. Shorter. Softer. Slower. The maid insisted on rhythm before vibration. Touch before frequency. Presence before stimulation. The billionaire watched. Learned. Participated. He began speaking to his daughter differently. Not louder. Not exaggerated. But close. Intentional. With his hand on her back, his chest against hers. She responded. Not always. Not predictably. But enough. Doctors began documenting instead of dismissing. This challenges current frameworks, one admitted reluctantly. The billionaire didn't care anymore. Frameworks hadn't held his child when she screamed. Weeks turned into months. The mansion changed. Music returned, but low. Felt more than heard. Floors carried rhythm. Walls echoed warmth instead of silence. The billionaire started missing meetings on purpose. One afternoon, as he lay on the floor with his daughter pressed against his chest, she made a sound. Not a cry. Not a scream. A laugh. It was imperfect. Broken. Breath heavy. But it was unmistakable. He froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered to the maid, who stood in the doorway. She smiled. "No," she said. "But I felt it." He laughed, then cried, his face buried in his daughter's hair. Doctors warned him constantly. This is not a cure. She may never hear normally. She may struggle. He nodded every time. "I don't need normal," he replied. "I need her." Then the world found out. A nurse talked. A driver overheard. A specialist hinted. Headlines exploded. Billionaire's deaf daughter shows miraculous response. Secret therapy? Ancient method or pseudoscience? The gates filled with cameras again. The billionaire shut them tighter. Then one morning, the maid didn't come. The nursery felt wrong without her. She didn't show up, a staff member said. Her room is empty. The billionaire felt cold spread through his chest. Find her. They did. At the gate. Security had stopped her. She's trying to leave, a guard said. No notice. The billionaire rushed out. Why are you leaving? He asked, breathless. The maid looked tired. Peaceful. Determined. Because she doesn't need me anymore, she said. That's not your decision, he snapped, panic rising. It is, she replied. If I stay, this becomes about me. About credit. About proof. About ownership. I don't care about that. You will, she said softly. Or others will, on your behalf. He stepped closer. You saved my daughter. She shook her head. No. I reminded her body how to listen. You taught her who to listen to. He swallowed hard. Then stay. Please. She hesitated. For her, he added. She looked past him to the nursery window, where the baby's silhouette moved. I lost my son because I stayed too long in places that didn't listen, she said. I won't repeat that mistake. He felt desperation claw up his throat. Then what am I supposed to do without you? She met his eyes. Listen. She turned and walked away. He stood there long after she was gone. That night, his daughter cried again. Not in fear. In need. And this time, there was no maid. Only him. He placed his hand on her back. Held her close. Spoke softly. She calmed. He realized then this was never about the object. It was about presence. About humility. About learning that power doesn't heal. Attention does. And just as he began to believe they were safe, his daughter stopped responding. Completely. The silence this time was different. It wasn't the quiet he had learned to live with. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't neutral. It felt heavy, like the air itself had decided to stop moving. The billionaire spoke her name softly. No reaction. He pressed his chest against hers, the way the maid had taught him. Still nothing. Hey, he whispered, panic creeping in. I'm here. Her eyes were open. Blank. Not tracking him. Not tracking anything. He slammed the emergency button with his free hand. Doctors flooded in. Machines hummed to life. Numbers flickered. Voices overlapped. She's stable. Vitals are normal. No neurological event detected. Then why isn't she responding? He demanded. No one answered him directly. She may be overwhelmed, one doctor said carefully. There can be periods of withdrawal. How long? He snapped. Hours. Days. Sometimes longer. The billionaire felt his chest tighten painfully. You're telling me after all this, she could just stop? The doctor didn't lie. Yes. That night was the longest of his life. He didn't leave the nursery. Didn't sit. Didn't sleep. He spoke to her constantly. Not pleading. Not commanding. Just present. He talked about the sound of rain on glass. About how floors vibrated when people danced. About how silence didn't mean emptiness, it just meant something else was happening underneath. Nothing. At dawn, he broke. He sank to the floor, his back against the crib, his head in his hands. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. I don't know how to listen the way you need me to. A knock came at the door. He didn't look up. Go away. The door opened anyway. He lifted his head sharply. The maid stood there. She looked exhausted. Older than before. Like the weight she'd been carrying had finally decided to show itself. You came back, he said, disbelief flooding his voice. She nodded once. I forgot something. Hope surged painfully in his chest. What? She stepped closer to the crib. Looked at the baby. Closure, she said. The doctors tried to intervene. We can't allow. The billionaire raised a hand. Leave us. They hesitated. Now. The room cleared. The maid knelt beside the crib. She didn't bring the object this time. She placed both hands gently on the mattress. Closed her eyes. And she stopped doing anything at all. No humming. No vibration. No stimulation. Minutes passed. This isn't working, the billionaire said, voice breaking. The maid didn't open her eyes. Shoo. Another minute. Then the baby shifted. Barely. The billionaire's breath caught. She's not lost, the maid said softly. She's integrating. Integrating what? He whispered. The idea that sound doesn't control her, she replied. That it doesn't have to arrive to be valid. The baby's fingers twitched. Then slowly, deliberately, she turned her head toward her father's voice. The billionaire collapsed forward, gripping the crib so hard his hands shook. She's back, he whispered. She's back. The maid finally opened her eyes. No, she said gently. She never left. Tears streamed freely down his face now. He didn't wipe them away. I would have destroyed this, he admitted hoarsely. If you hadn't stopped me. If I'd forced more. Faster. Louder. Yes, the maid said simply. Why didn't you take the credit? He asked suddenly. Why disappear when the world would have called you a miracle? She smiled sadly. Because miracles become cages. He nodded slowly. He understood now. What happens when you leave again? He asked. She stood. You continue. How? She placed his hand on his daughter's back. Like this. He did. The baby made a sound. Soft. Familiar. Not perfect. But real. Weeks later, the world was given a version of the truth. No miracle claims. No ancient secrets. No saviors. Just a child with a different relationship to sound and a father who finally learned how to be present without control. The foundation he built didn't bear his name. It bore hers. Not the maid's. His daughter's. The maid declined every invitation to return. She sent one message instead. Don't make listening a performance. Years passed. The girl grew. She learned sound in fragments, in vibrations, in connection. She spoke differently, laughed differently, experienced the world on her own terms. And her father? He became quieter, more attentive, more human. One evening, as they sat together, she placed her hand on his chest and smiled. "I feel you," she said. He smiled back, tears in his eyes. "That's enough," he replied. "If you stayed until the end, thank you." Stories like this don't spread unless people choose to pass them on. Like this video so it reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe for stories that go deeper than headlines. Comment what part hit you hardest. Because sometimes, the most powerful change doesn't come from noise. It comes from finally learning how to listen.